Is that a thumbnail?
Okay, I'm gonna stop it.
Hello, welcome to our channel. This is Sara and Nora's channel, and my name is Sara. I'm Sauce, and my sister is Nora Noose, and we like to talk about books. We love to read. We love to share books. This is our first foray into Booktube, which is scary. I've always been, well, not always. I'm a big reader. Now I'm a big reader, and my sister also loves to read, and I think it would be interesting to share, what we like to read with you, because I don't think a lot of people read the type of books we read. We're not like unique or anything, but I just feel like it's always nice to share different perspectives of reading and just like find our little corner of the internet who is interested in what we have to say and what we read. But this specific video, we're trying to do a bookshelf tour, and we're going to do it row by row instead of like one big video on our bookshelf. That's kind of, this first video is going to be on the very first row of our bookshelf. On this side, we have two bookshelves. Actually, we have two big bookshelves, and then there's a third mini bookshelf behind you. These bookshelves, there's two of them, consist of my books and Nora's books. So it's not just mine alone. I got these bookshelves from randomly Walmart. I don't even know if they still have them. I'm not like 100% in love with them, but they are, they're different, they're unique. And this has just been these books have just been an accumulation over years. I don't know when, but I've always read, like I was a Twilight girly. So I was a reader, but I never had like a huge collection of books. It was usually just like a small kind of, maybe like 30 books or something, not a lot. Now I have a lot of books because ever since the pandemic, I've been reading a lot. I mean, I used to read before, but my reading has massively just increased, and my style of reading has shifted so much, and I'm just like constantly wanting to learn and read, and so I'm just like collecting books at the same time. Not all of these have been read, obviously. Probably majority are unread. But this particular shelf is mainly fiction, and fiction, fantasy. Obviously, the top shelf that I'm talking about in this video is mainly nonfiction, but most of it is fiction, and then the other side is going to be nonfiction. That's kind of how we split it up. We tend to we organize by genre, loosely organized by genre. It is hard to organize perfectly, but I think that's what we prefer. Every row, so first row is gonna be, I'm gonna talk about, it's not gonna just be me talking about each row. Nora's gonna talk about some rows as well, and we'll just switch off depending on like which shelf has like more of our books, than the other. This first shelf had more books, my books, than her books, so I'm talking about it. But the next shelf is mostly her books. I'll just get straight into it, okay? So we have a lot of collections here. I'll just start with these collections. This is a collection that I purchased myself, and it's mostly around tech, which is a topic that I'm particularly interested in, the tech world. The first book we have is Voices from the Valley. Tech workers talk about what they do and how they do it. And this is edited by Ben Tarnoff and Moira Weigel. Moira Weigel. Excuse me if I can't pronounce anyone's names. So this particular book, it gets perspectives of, people who create a startup, founders, and people who work as contract workers within the tech industry, like massage therapists. So it's very interesting because you get a very kind of well-rounded view of the tech industry, and it gives you a lot of kind of secrets within the tech industry, because a lot of employees in the tech industry have to sign NDAs. So all these people are anonymous. So it's nice to get a perspective on employees within the tech industry, because we often don't really hear it because of the NDAs. That's that one. Blockchain Chicken Farm is the next one, and other stories of tech in China's countryside by Xiaowei Wang. Xiaowei Wang is the creative director at Logic magazine, and this particular book is about specifically the countryside in China and how it's pretty technological, pretty modern. There's idea that like it's pretty backwards, it's old-fashioned, but the author actually shows how its agricultural sector, its countryside, is very technologically advanced, and just the connections between the countryside and the kind of urban cities and how they're connected. So this was a very interesting book. The third book that I read from this collection is called What Tech Calls Thinking by Adrian Daub, an inquiry into intellectual bedrock of Silicon Valley. So Adrian Daub is a professor of comparative literature and German studies, and he looks at kind of where these ideas within Silicon Valley come from. Yeah, so he focuses on like specific people within the industry, like Peter Thiel. He looks at Peter Thiel and where Peter Thiel gets his ideas from, and he often traces it to a man named Rene Girard. He also looks at like concepts, move fast and break things, this idea of like disruption. He goes into like where these ideas come from, and he often finds it, because he's focused on German studies, he finds a lot of it in like German philosophy, possibly. I don't know. It's very interesting because it shows you how a lot of these ideas are formed by kind of the countercultural movement of the 1960s, and how their ideas are formed by like Enlightenment thinkers. This is a very interesting book. I really, really liked it. It is very tiny. It's more of like it's like an emphasis on inquiry than like a deep dive into Silicon Valley. So, very good book. I recommend. Subprime Attention Crisis is the last one by Tim Huang. Advertising and the Time Bomb at the Heart of the Internet. This kind of takes the logic of the housing bubble crisis and applies it to the advertising on like social media and stuff. It's like essentially these advertisements are subprime, just like the mortgages were subprime, and how there's like a possible bubble and it will burst and there'll be like a catastrophe. So that's Tim Huang's book. Very interesting insight. I learned a lot about like advertising and social media and how it works. So this is very interesting if you're interested in that. 2 books I haven't read. This is a really tiny collection from Columbia Global Reports. I guess Columbia University has these little global reports. I don't really know much about it, but I just found both of these books and I was interested in them. Just specifically the topic more so than the collection itself. So the first book I came across, I was drawn to by its cover because I really loved these colors. And it's Why Flying is Miserable and How to Fix It. And I really identify with that because I don't like flying. Flying is a miserable process. So that's kind of why I picked this. And it's by Ganesh Sitaraman. And he's a law professor and director of the Vanderbilt Policy Accelerator for Political Economy and Regulation. So he emphasizes the deregulation, I believe, of the airline industry. And that's probably one of the reasons why it's miserable. So I can't wait to get into this. I do like these shorter books, kind of like getting information, but in like a more bite-sized fashion. There's that. And then I have Laughter in the Dark, Egypt to the Tune of Change by Yasmin al-Rashidi. That I am very intrigued in Egypt, understanding Egypt a little bit more. And I think this one was interesting to me because it's connected to the Arab Spring, or what we call the Thawra. So looking from the perspective of the Arab Spring in Egypt, which was mainly led by the youth, and she looks at this youth who is obviously influenced by social media, as all youth today, but also by this hip-hop scene called Mahraganat, which has that kind of hip-hop scene has like a very deep dissatisfaction with the Egyptian state and the government. And so a lot of the youth identify with this genre, and how that is connected to the Arab Spring. So that's interesting because I am interested in the Arab Spring and I'm interested in Egypt. That's that tiny collection. There are these Foucault collections, but this is Nora's book. She's very interested in Foucault, and I'm not going to lie, I'm a little interested. And so the first book we have here is Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. I think this is where the panopticon idea comes from. So actually I'm interested in this. I'm intrigued by this. And then she also has Madness and Civilization, A History of Insanity in the Age of Reason. I believe he looks at the history, or it says here, the archaeology of madness in the West from 1500 to 1800. So that's interesting. Actually, I'm also interested in this. I don't think Foucault is specifically digestible, but I am interested. That's the little small Foucault selection. Michel Foucault. This next collection is Nora's. This is published by, 7 Stories. These beautiful editions are Che Guevara's diaries. So the first one is The Motorcycle Diaries. This is his journey to discover the continent of Latin America while he was still a medical student, setting out in 1952 on his motorcycle. So this is the first book. Then I believe the next one is The Congo Diary. This is when he goes to Congo after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And then the last one in this collection is The Bolivian Diary. This is his story when he goes to... This is his diary when he's in Bolivia, and that's very important because he dies. This is where he gets captured and killed, is in Bolivia. So yeah, these beautiful trilogy. Then we have The Radical Thinkers. This is from the publisher Verso. But these are all Nora's. These are not mine. These kind of books are too challenging for me. I'm not that into philosophy. Nora's more into philosophy. So the first book we have is On Karl Marx by Ernst Bloch. So it's a book on Karl Marx. Then we have Edward Said's Freud and the Non-European. Judith Butler, Frames of War, When Is Life Grievable? Chantal Mouffe, The Return of the Political. And then we have Theodore Adorno, Minima Moralia, Reflections from Damaged Life. I'm not going to get into these because I don't really know anything about them. And that's that. The next collection, well, I'm going to put this one aside for a second because all of these books are by Scholastique Mukasanga, who is a French Rwandan author. And these particular editions are by Archipelago Books. So they're kind of square-like. And these are all Nora's. So we have The Barefoot Woman, Our Lady of the Nile, Kibogo, Igufu, and Cockroaches. And these are all translated from French to English. I separated this one out because this is also an Archipelago book, but this is not by Scholastic Mukasanga. This is A Dream Come True, The Collected Stories of Juan Carlos Onetti. And this is translated from the Spanish to English. The next collection is these Oxford A Very Short Introduction books. These are little explanation, little books like that kind of give a basic explanation of different topics. And so we have 4 of these. So first we have City Planning by Carl Abbott. That's mine. Then we have Islamic History by Adam J. Silverstein. That's Nora's. Evangelicalism by John G. Stackhouse Jr. And Secularism by Andrew Copson. So that is a very short introduction, Oxford editions. The next tiny collection that I have, these are only my books, is these semiotic books, which are distributed by MIT Press. So these 2 books are The Making of the Indebted Man by Maurizio Lazzarato and Gore Capitalism by Sayek Valencia. I really like to collect kind of smaller random books from different publishers. I also have an interest in like capitalism and violence and all those things. So I was very intrigued by this book. It says explicit forms of violence are used to produce capital. So that kind of mixes in my fascination with understanding violence and understanding capitalism. This next one is about basically the debtor-creditor relationship. And I've already read Debt by David Graeber. So this is a topic I'm interested in. It is about like debt and the relationship between the debtor and the creditor. And just the importance in debt in society. So I'm very intrigued by those 2. This next collection, this is the Penguin Liberty series. This is Nora's collection. She just got 2 books. So the first book is about free speech. And then the second one is on religious freedom. Okay. Now I leave my favorite collection, which is the Penguin Modern Classics collection. And you know them by their robin egg blue spine. Yeah. They usually have like a portrait, like a picture on the front, and then they have these blue spines. And I got all these from like Book Depository. Rest in peace. Most of these are nonfiction. So we have What is History by E.H. Carr. So I'm interested in that, understanding history and how people shape it. The next one is Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery. I'm very interested in understanding slavery. This is actually, I've read a couple of books that kind of go around Black studies and slavery, and this book gets mentioned a lot, so I feel like it's a very important read. I still haven't read it, but this is at the top of my list to read. This book is Seasons of Migration to the North by Taib Saleh. This is a fiction book. This is written by a Sudanese author, and it's translated from Arabic into English. I just want to say this book is very, very good. I've read this one. So the first two I haven't read. This one I have, and I really found it so beautiful. It's written so well. There's another edition I annotated so much. I just used up all my tabs because the author, Taib Saleh's writing is so, so beautiful and powerful. Next book is Orientalism by Edward Said. A important read that everybody should read. It's not particularly riveting or very digestible. It is a bit dense, but it is very, very important if you want to kind of understand the relationship between, or the way the West kind of views the East. This is very important. And if you read any books around like the Middle East or around Islam, a lot of them reference Orientalism. As you can see, I loved it. Next is Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I believe this is he a Brazilian author? Yeah. I haven't read this yet. It's very tiny, but I heard it's a little tough, so I'm scared. But I also can't wait to read it. So I have my own Foucault because I was feeling jealous. So I got this. They have I would say like a bind up of like certain topics that Foucault talks about, and I was specifically interested in power. And it says here that this is the third and final volume of the Essential Works of Foucault series. So, and that's Foucault right there. I haven't read that. I'm scared of that one too. You know, he's not very approachable in his writing, but I will one day read it. This next book is Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. I haven't read this one. I've read his other two books. One of them is in this pile. I'm most excited to read this one because this one is very influential to a lot of other big authors and thinkers. So Fanon was he's a Martinican who went to France and got educated in France, like went to college in France, did his thesis and studied in France in psychotherapy. And he eventually goes to Algeria to become a psychiatrist, and he tends to treat a lot of Algerians who, during the War for Independence, were being tortured by the French. And he eventually goes on to join the resistance, the FLN in Algeria. And that shifts his thinking, and he starts writing more kind of anti-colonial work, criticizing colonialism and the system and violence that it creates. And more through a psychotherapy kind of lens, how it affects, how colonialism impacts the colonized and the colonizer psychologically. Ideas that he was figuring out in previous books, he comes finally to like a conclusion in this book after he's experienced the Algerian War, and he's been radicalized. And so he kind of talks about the economic and psychological degradation that is inflicted by imperialism. And this is very kind of fundamental book for a lot of people who are in the anti-colonial movement and the Pan-Africanist movement. So I haven't read this. This is a buddy read I'm going to read with Nora. Eventually we will read this. This was his first book, like his thesis when he was in school, Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks. And this is more about when he went to France, kind of being confronted with his blackness. Wretched of the Earth kind of explains how Anodyne colonialism gets into how colonialism impacts your psyche This one looks at how racism impacts your psyche. Also very good book. I already read that one, as you can see with the tabs. Very good. The next one is Women, Race, and Class by Angela Y. Davis. I read this one, as you can see. Very good. She kind of gets into basically race, women, and class and how those things intersect. She's a really approachable writer. Her writing is very easy, but very powerful. I really don't really read a lot about like gender or from a gendered lens, like a women's studies lens. So this was like a good kind of segue for me, since I am interested in race and class, to kind of see how that intersects. Yeah. The next one is Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism. This one I have read, but not this particular edition because it's too pretty to make messy. No, I'm just kidding. This book is a lot. It's really, really good. It's one of those books that's like changes you, that just like massively influences the way you read. This book is like very prescient. It's like as if she had wrote it right now. The title is a little misleading, but she kind of gets into like what the conditions that kind of led to Nazi Germany. And she also talks about the Soviet Union, like Stalin Russia. But specifically, I think her strength is Nazi Germany. So it's very interesting to understand like where the foundations of like anti-Semitism and where did like Nazism, like what is the environment that it grew out of. And she's very sarcastic writer. I really like how she writes. She is a controversial author. So yeah, that's just something to say. But I really, really like her. After reading this, I got like other books from her because I wanted to read more and I wanted to hear more what she had to say. So yeah, that's that one. And it is a really chunky book, but it's worth it. Speaking of Arendt, Eichmann in Jerusalem, A Report on the Banality of Evil. I just read this one this year, and very good, very good. Kind of gets into Adolf Eichmann. She gets into this is her getting into his trial, which was happening in Jerusalem. She explores kind of evil, and she explores what kind of man does it take to do this terrible, terrible thing. And so it's very interesting. Definitely recommend reading it. So then the next one I have is On Revolution. So you can see that I bought more books because of Origins. I haven't read this one, so I can't really say anything much about it. I just know that it's her talking about revolution. Yeah. And the last one in this collection is the autobiography of Malcolm X. I have not read this one, shamefully. It's very important. It's a very important read, so I definitely want to get to it soon. Yeah. The last thing that I will just fly by is these McCat library books. They're like little short analyses on important books. And a lot of these are Nora's. I do have some. The first one is On Photography by Susan Sontag, which is my book. We have Politics of Piety by Saba Mahmood, The Islamic Revival and the Feminist Subject. Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard. Samuel P. Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order. Edward Said's Orientalism, which after reading Orientalism, we looked at this analysis. So it is nice to kind of have to read with the book itself and help you kind of understand it. John A. Hobson's Imperialism, A Study. Ernest Gelner's Nations and Nationalism. Albert Hourani's A History of Arab Peoples. Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. Theology of Discontent by Hamid Dabashi. The Old Social Classes and the Revolutionary Movement in Iraq by Hannah Batatu. Centuries of Childhood, A Social History of Family Life by Philip Arias. Imagined Communities by Benedict Anderson. And last but not least, An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness by Chinua Achebe. So that is the first shelf, and that is all the collections that we have collected. Thank you for watching this video. In the next video, hopefully we get to do, Nora is going to talk about the second shelf, which should be memoirs and translated works, more fiction. So look forward to that. And thank you for watching this really long video. And I hope you found some books maybe you're interested in, or maybe you've read before, and we have kind of similar readings. And I hope you have a lovely day or night. Bye.